All right. So if you don't mind just giving us a quick who you are, what you do, quick intro about you.
Absolutely. So I'm Bay and I manage Hardy House Homestead. I'm mostly active on Instagram, but I'm trying to get more active on YouTube and stuff like that. And we've been homesteading for almost 2 years now. And we have 2.5 acres. And I blog mostly about like simple living and minimalism and motherhood. And then I throw in stuff about our lifestyle of homesteading.
Okay. So I saw, do you have a podcast you're starting to?
Oh yes, that's
Yeah.
that's like the thing I started with is the podcast. Yes. I've
Okay.
been doing that since last April.
Okay. So where can people find you for your podcast?
Okay, so the podcast is called the Minimalist Homesteaders and it's
Mhm.
on like I think 6 different platforms. A lot of people find it on Apple Podcasts and then I use Spotify a lot. So those are the top two.
Okay. All right. So what got you in to homesteading? What got you interested in growing and this very different lifestyle?
Oh my goodness. So so what really got us going with homesteading was 2020 and
Mm-hmm.
like the food supply. That was what gave me the jolt to start. And
Yeah.
I was excited about homesteading long before that and I had been thinking about that like for the 6 months leading up to a lot of the craziness that happened when COVID first started.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I was raised on a ranch, so I kind of once I got out into the world and I realized that I really enjoyed the simple lifestyle of living in
Yeah.
the country and growing your own food and having animals and stuff. I just realized like I want to go back to that and I want to raise my kids that way because it was so beneficial for me growing up. But really, what gave me the jolt to jump in and get chickens and start learn to process them and stuff like that was 2020. It was the craziness of COVID, and I just realized how fragile our food supply is and how we're so dependent on the stores and truckers bringing food in and stuff. And I just realized, there are a couple things I could do differently to make us less dependent, and so that was really what got me going.
So when you had that realization, were you still, I know you said you grew up on a ranch and I grew up on kind of like a little homestead too, so I get going back to your roots. Um, were you living in suburbia? Were you living in an apartment? Were you still gardening? Were you still doing something? Or had you kind of like completely went away from that lifestyle and said, oh my gosh, I need to change?
So that's a really interesting question because looking back, I'm like, I feel like a lot of the homesteading skills I've learned in the last 2 years are brand new to me because like I grew up on a ranch, but we mostly raised cows and stuff like that. And we
Okay.
had chickens at some point, but it wasn't like we didn't really do a lot of like the canning and stuff like that I'm learning now. And I definitely had never butchered like a chicken before or
Right.
anything
Yeah.
before. I mean, I remember helping my uncle skin a few jackrabbits and stuff, but it was never like part of our life. So that was a huge difference.
Right.
And I mean, I had been a personal trainer in the city. And when my husband and I first got married, we lived in an apartment for like 6 months. And then we bought our house out in the country. But I wasn't thinking like, oh, cool, it has 2.5 acres. Let's go ahead and make a big garden and let's have livestock. Like
Mhm.
it was just kind of like, great, it has 2 acres. That means we'll have land so that we're not right next to our neighbors. But I wasn't thinking of using the land
Mm.
to homestead at all. It wasn't even on my radar. So
Right.
that's what's kind of funny about this is like we've always kind of had a rural mentality and always kind of like a country living mentality. But homesteading is like taking that to the max, like to the next level.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we were mentally.
Okay. Okay. So, what are some of the main things that you wish you would have known before you started this? I know we started getting into a little bit, but some of the top things, because, oh man, going back, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's really, really hard to answer. And I'm sure it's hard for everyone because it's kind of like there are so many things that I would do differently, but in a way I almost am glad that I didn't, because the learning experience was huge in itself.
Yeah.
And I also got pregnant with our baby like 4 months into our homesteading journey. So
Wow,
that
that's a
kind of
lot.
threw me, yes, it totally threw me for a loop, because all of a sudden I had to I got a pressure canner, but I didn't use it at all because I was like, I'm not going to learn to pressure can while I'm pregnant. Like, I'm just focused on being pregnant right now. And a lot of people do that. I've heard of many people going ahead and like learning to can and all this stuff. But when I'm pregnant personally, I'm just like, no, I'm going to just try to survive during this whole 9-month period.
Focus on the baby and your health. And that's
Yes,
a lot in itself.
exactly. It's a lot in itself for sure. So, I think I'm very much a jump in with both feet kind of person. Like right off the bat, that first summer, we got chickens and ducks and quail and rabbits. And I was even thinking like we should get goats too. And this is like within the first 4 months. Like I was just like, let's just do it and figure this out.
Yep.
And so I feel like there's not much I didn't attempt in the first 4 months of our journey. And that was back in June of 2020. So I don't know. I think if I were to narrow it down, if I could change like 3 things that I wish I had done differently, I think I would have planted more in the garden. I would have like focused on the garden more and focused on composting more, because it does take such a long time for compost to get really good. And I didn't really I mean, I did a little bit of that, but I wish I had done more. I think I wish that I had done meat chickens right off the bat. I was more focused on let's get some chickens in here that we can have long term. So I chose Rhode Island Reds, and I was planning on letting the Rhode Island Reds kind of renew themselves, because during 2020 I was like, we may not be able to get chicks next spring. Like, who knows? Things were so fragile and weird and like unprecedented. How many shortages, and like the postal system wasn't working. And so I was really thinking, I want to have a bird that I know we can just put in the incubator, put their eggs in the incubator and keep them renewing themselves, right? That was my mindset.
A multi-purpose kind of.
Yes, multi-purpose, exactly. And they're great for eggs and they're great for meat, both. So I was almost like, looking back, it's almost like I was preparing for the end of the world. Like, if I can't get chicken, what's that?
I did the same thing.
Yeah, it kind of put us in that mindset, right? That was such a crazy time. And it's hard. I have to kind of like stop myself getting back into that, because there's so much joy in homesteading, and I don't want it to be like a doomsday thing. Like, I want to enjoy our life as a homesteader.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But if I could go back, I think that I would still do the Rhode Island Red thing, because that was a great intro kind of breed for us. But I wish that I had done meat chickens for sure, because it's amazing how much more meat you get. And it was really disappointing to process Rhode Island Reds and be like, wow, there's like nerd, That would be the second thing. And I think if I had to choose one other thing, I would have started canning earlier. Definitely would have started canning earlier.
It's intimidating. Those pressure cookers are kind of intimidating. Like, the water bath canners aren't as intimidating to do it that way. But you hear all these horror stories of things exploding, and it is intimidating. I remember my grandma teaching me, but then it was so long. I had to go over and have my sister help reteach me how to do it, because I was afraid to do it, So that's an intimidating skill to learn. It really is, especially when you've got a new baby or you're pregnant. Like, so you kind of jumped in with both feet first, which is definitely the way I do things. So I can relate to that. Out of all those things, what do you think was maybe your biggest failure? Like, oh, this was the biggest failure in this thing I did. But coming from that, you learned a lesson. So what did you learn from it? I think you might have already answered that, but.
Oh man, I have a doozy. I have a doozy for you. So I mentioned that I grew up on a ranch.
Okay.
And mom taught really well, like handry, and like you take care of your animals first and foremost. You never let them suffer ever. Right. And so that's why this story is my worst failure to date when it comes to livestock. I didn't even make any mistakes like this growing up. Like this is to date the worst failure. But I talked about it on the podcast because I was like, I'm not going to be quiet about a mistake that somebody else could possibly benefit from hearing about.
Right.
Even though
exactly.
It sucks that this happened.
Yeah,
it's good to share that. Somebody else might really benefit from hearing that, and maybe it'll help them not to make that mistake. So right. Last fall, I got a couple of chicks that were a little bit older, and then we also had some baby chicks. And the two chicks who were a little older, I jumped the gun and I put them out with the other birds way too early because I thought they would be okay, because we had done that before, putting, 2-month-old chicks out, and it's been fine enough. So I did that, and they got mauled and pecked to death by the other birds, and I felt horrible about it. So that's my biggest failure.
Yeah, I've made the same mistake. And you feel horrible when something like that happens, but
it's a rough one.
And I didn't really ever see anybody talking about a lot of their failures and the things they did wrong. I saw a lot of the good stuff. And, when one of those things happen to you, you take it so personally and it's so discouraging. So I think it's so important to show both sides. There's so much joy, but there are also hardships. And it's okay as long as we learn from it, So
yes.
If you were talking to somebody who is looking at going into homesteading, what advice would you have for them? Let's say they're coming from a small, suburbia kind of place and say, I want to go get some land. What advice would you have for them?
Don't get in over your head financially. That's number one. I've been thinking about this a lot because I get a lot of questions from people about what can I do right where I am?
Right.
And I think it's so important to be able to do something with what you have currently. So if you have I know somebody who has just a balcony and that's it. And so she has container gardens, and that works for her, tower gardens and stuff. And that really works well for her. But I think a lot of the time people will look at someone else's situation and automatically think oh my goodness, they had to go into debt to do that. Or, there's no way that I could possibly have that much acreage, even if it's just a small amount. 2.5 acres is a tiny amount to some people, not to others. And so I'm always really upfront about the fact that in New Mexico, land prices are really, really low. And they're not as low as they were 5 years ago. But we bought our property. I mean, it was cheaper for us to buy our property than it was in the, our rents were to be less buying 2.5 acres house. And so, but in a lot of other states, that's just not the case. And if we lived in a different, we would probably really have the property that we have. I definitely wouldn't be able to stay home with the kids. I would have to work just to make meat, I think. And so I think it's really important to think about how we can make the best of our situation and be more sustainable and be more self-sufficient right where we are. And there are so many things that people can do. And I get a lot of questions also about what does it mean to be a homesteader? Am I a homesteader once I've processed my own birds? Am I a homesteader once I've started canning? I don't think there is a definition. I think that
No.
when you homestead, you're just doing whatever you can to be more self-sufficient in your situation. And so if you don't have the space or like the ability to have chickens, like you're still a homesteader just with a garden. If you plant a seed, to me, you're a homesteader. I don't think that I'm more of a homesteader or that somebody else is more of a homesteader than me based on stuff like that. I think that everybody just can do whatever they can do, because there's no real definition of homesteading, right?
No, there's not. And that's a great point. And I love that you make that point, because before we got our land a few years ago, we actually lived in suburbia and we had a normal backyard. And I found out that I could have chickens in my neighborhood backyard. I had to get a permit, but I could have 8 chickens. They had to be hens, no roosters. And I, for a couple of years, it turned my little neighborhood backyard into a tiny homestead. It was 19 raised bed gardens and 8 chickens, and it was kind of crazy. And then my daughter's little playground was like right in the middle. But that's so important to point out, that no matter where you're at, you start with what you have. Start somewhere. And even if it's small, even before that, I started with container gardening on the front porch. And, even if you have a balcony, every little bit makes a difference. That we could go on for so long just about the health benefits of growing your own food, and not having the pesticides and the nutrient content of growing your own food. It's so important. So every little bit does make a difference, and just encouraging people to start with what they have, I think, is so important. So I love that you say that, because that's it's something I'm so passionate about. And the community I used to live in, I know a lot of them really want more content and videos on how to do stuff. And so just getting people to realize, just because you have a smaller property doesn't mean you can't do it. So I love that.
Yes, I totally agree.
So what are some of the resources that you learned from, things you've read, that have helped you along the way and helped encourage you and help get you where you are?
That's a good question too, man. You've got a lot of great questions. So let's see. I have like a handful of books that I really like. One of them is, I think it's the Beginner Vegetable Gardener's Bible by is it John Smith? Everybody knows that guy in the gardening world, but it might be Edward Smith, but he's really well known, and I'm sorry I don't remember his name right at the moment, but his name is Smith, and he has like a book that's basically A to Z of plants and how to take care of them, how to do everything with them. And when I was looking for kind of an all-purpose book, again, because I'm a minimalist and I want to know that what I'm buying, I'm going to get a lot of mileage out of. I don't want to just learn about one style of gardening. I just want to know, like, okay, generally speaking, how do I take care of these plants? And so that book is really helpful to me. And then another one is the Backyard Homestead. And that book is so great because it touches on so many subjects, just a little bit.
Mm.
Do you know about that book? Have you?
Yes, I love that book.
Yeah, I feel like everybody has that book. It's such a great one.
I love it. Yeah.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah.
So,
and then I guess when it comes to, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I guess I could list other books that I'm liking right now, but if I were to tell somebody about resources that would help them, I listened to podcasts a lot my first days that I was like, I have to build another quail cage, and I didn't want to do it because it's so tedious, but I thought, I'm going to listen to this podcast, or I'm going to binge listen to all these podcast episodes while I'm doing it. And it kind of kept me going. Or like, in 2020, we had a baby, our middle was a baby, and And then our oldest was a little bit younger. And so I would get up and go out at like 4 a.m. during the summer when it would start to get light earlier. And I would just listen to podcasts while I worked on stuff and move dirt, because there's so much tedious work in homesteading. And that would get me excited to go and do it, listening to a podcast while I was doing it. So I really like Melissa K. Morris's podcast. I really like Harold Thornbro's podcast that he was doing before. He's got a different podcast now, but that one, his old one that I listened to a lot, was called Modern Homesteading.
Okay.
The Modern Homesteading podcast, I think. And then the third podcast that I listened to a lot was don't you love how sometimes you're trying to tell somebody something and you suddenly don't remember?
I do it all the time.
I think Brian. Yeah, right? It's crazy. It's like mom brain all of a sudden.
If you think of it later,
his name is Brian.
Go ahead and send it to me, and I can link it below.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I just remember, and he's got tons of episodes, so much good information in there. So those 3 podcasts are awesome. And I can definitely send you all of these so that you can put it in the notes and stuff.
Definitely. I love podcasts because that, like you said, there are so many tedious things, like for us chopping wood and just so many cleaning out coops. It's just so many things that, you know, I always have something. Like I feel like if I'm not absorbing some type of information and doing the physical thing, that I'm wasting time that I could be learning, you know? So, yeah. So with the animals that you have, I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a lag here. All right, I think we're good. The animals that you have, you have rabbits, right? And chickens. What all do you have, I guess?
I recently made the decision to stop caring for rabbits and quail and to just focus on the ducks and the chickens, because it's just too much for me in my stage of life to do all those different types of animals. So, but we did add Muscovy ducks like a few months ago, and so that's a new thing. But we have Muscovy ducks, regular ducks, and chickens.
Are the Muscovy ducks easier than regular ducks? Because I know we've looked into it a little bit.
That's a good question. I feel like right now they're about the same, but they're easier in terms of what I've heard. The reason that we chose Muscovy ducks is that I heard that they are easier in terms of incubation. So like I wanted something that I didn't have to rely on the incubator to get more. And Muscovy ducks are awesome because they will lay their own eggs, right? They'll lay their eggs and then they'll send their own eggs much more reliably than any other duck. So that was why we chose them. And in that way, I think that they're easier because, you know, I've had horrible hatch rates on all of our eggs. Some of them did better than others. Like the quail did better than the chickens and the duck eggs. But we have serious humidity issues in New Mexico, so I think that's part of it. And plus, it's just a lot of electricity.
Yeah. Do the Muscovy do better?
For only a few eggs.
Yeah. Do the Muscovy do better in terms of not needing as much water? That's one of the things I've heard, that they're more land-friendly ducks.
That's a good question. I feel like that would make sense. I mean, they're more wild than regular ducks. And we have a big, like, it's not like a swimming pool, like a kid swimming pool. It's a little bit smaller, but deeper. And they don't get in the water like the other ducks do. Like they mostly just dunk their heads, but I haven't seen them get in the water. So that's probably true. Yeah.
Okay. That's one of the main reasons why we considered doing the Muscovy, because we have khaki Campbells that were supposed to be runner ducks, and they're khaki Campbells. And then we end up getting a runner duck, and then we had the Pekings. So the one thing with the ducks, they do make a mess. Our khaki Campbells
Oh
actually
yeah,
hatched
I
out.
definitely do.
Yeah, our khaki Campbells hatched out 8 of their own babies this year. So I was
Oh
kind of surprised
wow,
that they did that.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Um, so
That's
what with your
great. You know, when we first started, we chose khaki Campbells, and
okay.
the reason that I switched away from them was just that I got this flock of khaki Campbells, and they were like wild, like they had lived in this for a long time, and they had hatched out their own babies, and then they were just this family of ducks. And she was like, she advertised them on Facebook, just like, somebody please take these ducks. And I was like, yes, me, I'll take them, I'll take them. But they were crazy. They were so wild. They just ran away from me, and that means that when I was duck, I'm really handling them a lot because I don't want to have wild creatures
Yeah,
that
no,
run from
not
me and don't realize I'm their keeper and stuff.
yeah, especially when you have small children around and you want to have your kids involved in what you're doing. You want to, you know, have the
Yes.
so you think the Muscovy are a lot better with your kids?
Oh yeah, they are definitely. I mean, they walk away from me. They like try to give me a wide berth. Like they'll see me coming and they'll kind of walk away, but they don't
Uh-huh.
run like mad like the khaki Campbells did.
Okay.
And again, I don't.
Yeah.
That was my only experience with khaki Campbells, so it's very possible that they're not that way in general. I mean, you would know the answer to that.
Did you get yours when they were older
I
or
mean,
were
are
they
they
younger?
crazy? Yes, they were older. They were like a whole family of ducks, and the
Okay.
mama and the papa duck were like adults, and then the babies were juveniles. But they were wild. Like they ran from me and flew away from me, and it was just madness. It made me not want to go out to the coop because they were so
Yeah.
like crazy.
For us, we got our khaki Campbells when they were just, a couple days old. And they're super tame. They come to my front door and my back door every morning and every night, and they wait for their
Oh, that's
treats.
great.
And my daughter picks them up, and so they're really tame. So I don't know if it's necessarily a breed thing. I think it's probably just how used to people they are. Just in my experience with them. But that kind of goes for all of the
Yeah.
birds. We've got a pet turkey that follows us around like a puppy dog. So, but we've had her since she was like 3 or 4 days
Oh,
old.
that's great.
So out
Oh,
of
I love
your,
that. That is so cute.
I love her. Out of your animals, what would you suggest somebody start with?
Oh man, I feel like I'm really conflicted between chickens and ducks because I've heard of a lot of people really enjoying ducks much more
Mhm,
than chickens,
mhm.
but I guess it would depend on your goals. I really enjoy both our chickens and our ducks for different reasons. Um, you're talking about animals, right? For sure.
Yeah,
Like if they're for sure
yeah,
going to choose an animal to start with.
right.
Okay. I I don't know. I feel like for me, it's a toss up between ducks and chickens. So I would just probably say, if you're choosing an animal, and I mean for sure ducks and chickens to me seem like they're the same amount of easy, and then like it's but then again, it depending on your situation, I would say probably quail are easier for some people than chickens are, because there are some people who don't have a lot of space, and
So,
like if you're in a
yeah.
suburban homestead, quail might be easier for you, and for other people maybe rabbits are easier than chickens.
Mhm.
I mean, what would you say? Like you started with chickens, right?
Um, Actually, we had
And you
rabbits.
did that in suburbia, so
Yeah, we had rabbits before we had
oh,
chickens.
okay.
Um, but it was always because it was a pet. Um, Hold on, something popped up here. All right. Um, and then when pandemic happened, I kind of switched my mindset and said, oh, maybe I need to look at a different type of rabbit. And we had, at that point, we had a bunch of pet bunnies. We had lion heads, but we switched to New Zealand Reds. And they were easy for, anybody in an apartment, So like you said, it depends on your situation. And then we went to chickens and then to ducks. I think if it's birds, chickens are pretty easy. They are I equate them to like an outside cat almost, because they can free range pretty good. So yeah, it really, but I do think that a rabbit is a really good place to start. They do take more care, but they're great for fertilizer for your gardens. I've never processed any of our bunnies, but we could if it got to that point. We breed them, do 4-H and sell them. But so between chicken and rabbits, I think is what I would say. So did you haven't ended up getting goats then yet, right?
No. And it's a good thing, because my husband was kind of like, let's pump the brakes on that idea. And I was like, no, but let's just try it. I mean, come on, we can do it. And he was like, yeah, let's just wait. And I'm really glad he said that, because I don't think we could have, that would have been mayhem. It would have been mayhem. So maybe someday. How about you? Do you guys have goats?
We don't. I did the same thing that you did. Once we got land, I was like, oh, well, maybe we could do it, or maybe we could do lamb, or, and I think that's one thing to remind people of, is you get so excited and you want to do it all. And then you go, holy cow, this is a lot of work. And to remind people to kind of take it slow, not to be afraid to do it, but really focus on one thing at a time, because you kind of get so excited.
Yes.
And you So one of the things that I've seen you mention recently is minimalism. And I love that, because we get so burdened down by all of this extra stuff in the outside world and all of our own physical stuff. How did you come to the realization that would help you? And then how did you get started?
Okay. So I actually started exploring minimalism long before, like 2 years before we started homesteading. And I remember just feeling like no matter what I do, I feel behind on house stuff, and every chore that I can spend all day on chores and I'm still behind. How is this possible? Yeah. And the jury is still out on whether that's just a part of motherhood. Like I feel like a lot of that is just motherhood and how hard it is to kind of stay on top of things, because you have all these other people who have needs and who need to eat and who need clean clothes and they need all these things. And I mean, it's never going to stop. Like, clothes are never going to stop getting dirty. Dishes are never going to stop getting dirty. But I really started exploring minimalism when I realized I only had one baby at that point. He was getting to be like 3. I think he was 2.5 or 3. I think he was going on 3. So he was 2.5. And I look into minimalism because I was amazed at how much stuff I had kept for emotional reasons more than anything else. Like, I would feel guilty if I got rid of it because someone gave it to me, or I would feel like I lost part of myself if I parted with this item. And I mean, I had so many random things like hoodies from college and, dishes and stuff that were given to us when we first got married. And I just thought, like, if I get rid of this, then it's like I'm getting rid of, like, the special memory with that item. And so when
Right.
I realized that that was my motivation for a lot of what I kept, and it actually dragged me down emotionally, I was like, I have to kind of cut this off at the knees. I have to just try something radical to get my life back and to get my joy back. And since then, I've kind of gone back and forth. Like, I've allowed accumulation to happen again. I've definitely experienced regret from getting rid of too much, but it was mostly like silly regret. Like, it was never like, oh, I regret getting rid of that because now we have to spend thousands of dollars to replace it. It's more like, oh man, like, I never thought I would do that craft again, and I got rid of all those craft supplies, and now I don't have it, and I wish that I didn't have to replace it, and I feel guilty for replacing it. It was never a big enough deal. And in fact, today I just took a whole other carload of more stuff that I just realized had negative feelings attached to it. And I realized it was really holding me back from just like living my best life and living in the now. Because every time I
Yeah.
saw that item, even though I liked the item itself, like, it just took me back to that negative memory. And I kept thinking like, oh, give it enough time and I won't think of that day every time I look at this. But no, I continue to look at that, and then it caused me not to wear that outfit or to use that set of dishes. And so I just realized, we're not our stuff, and I need to stop attaching that memory to this item, and I just need to move forward. So really for me, minimalism is about moving forward and not living in the past, and really trying to enjoy each day, like with my kids, and especially with homeschooling. I feel like I can allow a material item that brings back bad memories to rob my joy, and then I'm not on for my kids, and they need that so much from me. So yeah, that's basically my whole philosophy about it. And this is a great time for you to ask me that. Like, I'm so glad that was a question today, because I'm like so in that mindset right now, because I'm just to a point now where I can wear pants again after having my third baby. And I'm finally like looking at some of my clothes and going like, yeah, I bought those clothes because I liked them and they were pretty and I enjoyed them while I was pregnant, but now I need to move on from that. And so it's okay to let it go. It doesn't mean that I'm, throwing all those memories in the trash. It just means that I need to make new memories in different clothes.
Yeah, that makes so much
I don't know if
sense.
that answers the question.
Oh yeah,
But that's kind of where my
absolutely.
mindset is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's hard when you're a mother because you have a lot of things that you have this sentimental attachment to. And I kind of think being a homesteader too, you kind of had this preparing for the worst mentality sometimes, or a prepper mentality. So that causes you to like kind of over clutter sometimes, and it is so important to focus on um, living now, but it's still okay to plan for the future. But I mean, kind of everything has some kind of energy attached to it. Like when we grow things, we pay attention to the energy of nature, and if it has like a negative energy or memory, it is important and okay to let it go. And a lot of times we don't. We just harbor all this stuff, and I am so trying to get more minimalistic. We cut our living space when we moved almost in half. So, oh man, yeah. Those are some really good things to look at. Like you said, just look at something and does it give you a good feeling? Does it let you live in the now, or does it bring back a bad memory or something you don't need anymore? I'm trying to remember. I saw a quote a while ago, but it was about a hoarder, and it was a mom who had a bunch of kids, and talking about getting rid of the old memories. She didn't want to get rid of the old memories, but um, I think it was a conversation or something between two women. She said, but you have to move over and allow yourself to make new ones. Make space for the new ones, I think is how she said it.